Many years ago, there was a game store that existed about 3 blocks from where I currently reside. I popped in to say hello and dump off a paycheck every few weeks, and I found quite a few odd games in there that I'd never seen before. This week's review, The Cursed Crusade, was one of those games. I first played it when I house sat for a week, and in between playing with the pups, I would boot this game up and play through it. I remember it not being very exciting to play, but I was able to finish it that week. I've been meaning to give it another go for a review, and although I had attempted about a year ago, I just got bored playing it and moved on to something else. But this time around, I sat down and finished it for the second time. Was it any better this time around? The Cursed Crusade takes place around 1200 AD, during the Crusade. You play as one of 2 warriors, Frenchman Dens de Bale, or the Spaniard Esteban Noviembre. Dens is the main character, but if you have a friend that you want to drag through this game's co-op, then they can play as Esteban. They are both cursed, and Dens is trying to both find a cure and also look for his father to take back his family name, as apparently his father went missing in a prior campaign, so his uncle took the DeBale property as his own. Honestly, you never really understand what's going on with the backstory, as the uncle is simply named in passing, but you never confront or even see him. Instead, the game relies more on the curse and the ulterior motives of the leaders of the Templars. They are seeking out the holy relics of the church, for probable nefarious reasons. You would think that objects related to Christ would be holy in nature, but it's declared that if someone that's evil wields them, then hell is able to use them. Okay then. The Cursed Crusade tries to rely heavily on the story, but honestly, I found it to be fairly boring. Not only is it hard to follow due to the story's narration jumping around and seemingly failing to tie up any plot lines, but some of the scenes that you were given are just too long for their own good, with bland presentation that fails to keep my interest. You're probably thinking, well, Reaper, you probably just aren't interested in the Crusades, and that's partly true, but even if I was, the deliveries of the lines fail to evoke any emotions. Dens especially speaks his lines about as well as I speak mine off of this sheet of paper that I'm currently reading from, and so you can probably understand how boring that may be. Does that gameplay any better? Well, let me explain how it works, and then I'll talk about my experiences with it. The Cursed Crusade is an action game. If you're playing solo, you play as Dens, but Esteban is normally partnered with you regardless. You simply move along the level, searching for your objective, which is normally just reaching the end of the area, while battling any enemy militia that you may encounter. The combat itself is competent enough. You can chain together the weaker and stronger attacks using square and triangle respectively, and R2 is used both to block and parry. If you parry an enemy while they have a whitish outline, they will be stunned for a second or two, opening them up to easy hits. You can also use circle to either kick an opponent to perform what's called a guard break, which also stuns him, or if you press it while an opponent glows orange, then you'll do an evade to dodge their own guard break. It might sound complicated, but I promise, it's not. One major thing of note, the combat is very slow paced. Yes, you'll be mashing square and triangle, but you have to literally shear off any armor that the enemy is wearing before they start taking physical damage. You'll know when that's happening because you're going to start seeing blood on your strikes. Obviously, weapons like 2-handed axes will shear off armor quicker than a single-wielded sword, but no matter what you use, combat is fairly easy. What's more, you can opt to switch out your weapons frequently, which you'll need to do, as the armaments will degrade upon use. Clicking L3 will allow you to check the status of your wielded weapons, but I found it easier just to locate a downed sword and see what colors the swaps show. The darker red the icon gets, the closer the weapon is to breaking. If the weapon breaks, you will keep using it, but it does seriously nerf damage since you're only striking with the shaft. Giggity. There's lots and lots of weapons available for you, but I can't say for sure whether, say, one sword will do more damage than another, other than the 2-handed varieties. This is pretty neat, and even better, you can mix and match dual-wielded equipment. Sure, you can focus on only holding a weapon in one hand so that you don't have both weapons degrade at the same time, but why bother when dual wielding can speed up the killing process? At any one time, you can carry 2 weapons in each hand, and a 2-handed weapon on your back. Shields are also available, and you do always carry a crossbow for long-range attacks, although the use of this is limited to certain situations. There's also different combos you can do depending on the weapon that you are carrying. Let's move on to the curse itself. Dens and Esteban are being hunted down by death itself, who looks badass. Of course, our heroes will attempt to fend them off by utilizing their curse. At any time, you can press L1 to enter the curse state, wiping the world from one of stone and dirt into one of fire and brimstone. While you are cursed, Dens will do seriously buff damage to enemies, usually knocking them down in only a few hits. Because of this, you'll be spending quite a bit of time in this cursed mode, but you do need to be careful. Since it is, curse, Dens will die if he remains cursed for too long. You'll know when this is happening because the meter on your HUD will deplete, and you'll see your health start to drain. Just press L1 to snap out of it and come back to the real world, and you'll be fine. There's some quirks to this curse meter. For one, you can't enter the curse state unless the bottom portion of the gauge is filled. This part fills up on its own though, and it's usually done within seconds. The second and third parts are filled up by dishing out damage to your enemies. The final catch is that if the meter is ever maxed out, you'll be overwhelmed by the curse, which simply means that you'll be forced into the curse state again until the top portion of the meter drains, as then you can just hit L1 to snap out of it. In addition to just doing more damage, there are a few special abilities that you can use while cursed. You can throw a small burst of fire at a single target, or you can emit a wave of what seems to be a slightly weaker flame. Somehow, you can even heal by getting close to your partner and pressing L1 and triangle, but I only ever figured out how to properly use it once. I will say that healing usually isn't a problem though. You start the game with armor, and can opt to get new pieces in between levels. Only once your armor is destroyed will you start taking life damage when hit in that part of the body. Dens also regains a small fraction of his life if he's close to death. If you do fall, Dens will attempt to ward off death for a few seconds while he waits for Esteban to revive him. Normally, I talk about the graphics at the end of my reviews, but I'm going to break the trend here and talk about them now, since this kind of comes with the curse. The visuals are, I gotta say, kind of bland, even for the PS3. Almost every stage looks identical, since the majority of the levels take place in the middle of giant stone-built cities. There's a few pieces of vegetation here and there, but it's also overshadowed by the overbearing grays and browns. The armor has a weird, super shiny feel to it, and it reminds me of another game that developer Kalutin created, Bet on Soldier, which I reviewed very early on in my reviewing life. When striking said armor, you can see sparks, but they are delayed, coming out like a second or so after the strike happens, so it feels kinda disjointed. But most of all, you'll probably be spending a lot of time in cursed mode, and since you see everything burnt and fire all around with cracks in the ground, you'll quickly notice that it kinda looks bad. It's nice to see such a difference between the grays and reds, but it just has a low budget look to it, and it never changes, so different stages all have the same hellish look. I think if the textures had a higher resolution, I wouldn't have cared so much, but it just bothered me. You might say, well, then suck it up and don't go into curse mode, but there's a few arguments to this. For one, there are times when you are forced into it to progress the story. When this happens, your curse gauge won't deplete, but when the game forces you out of it, the gauge resets, so if you had a nearly maxed out gauge that you were preparing for an upcoming fight, well, sorry about that. Secondly, there are multiple collectibles that you can hunt down in order to upgrade Dens. These are in the forms of gold coffers, lost souls, and crucifixes. The gold coffers are simply small chests that Dens kicks to claim the gold within. Why do video game characters kick chests anyway? Does that actually open them? Typically, every stage has anywhere from 3 to 5 of these coffers. Lost souls and crucifixes are a bit different though. For each of these, you must be cursed in order to see them. Lost souls are simply wandering spirits that need to be dispatched. The white ones can be simply attacked, but the red ones must be taken down using one of the cursed abilities. The crucifixes, of which there is normally one per level, simply needs to be destroyed using a cursed ability in order to gain credit for completing it. In order for the game to consider credit for the collectibles, you must hit the stage requirement. All coffers and a crucifix must be found, but as for the souls, you are often given a kill amount needed with a few extra souls in the level just in case you miss one. Why would you even care about all this stuff? After every stage, you are given a tally of how well you completed the stage, along with a ranking that really means nothing. You are given 4 victory points automatically, with an additional 1 each if you found all of the coffers, destroyed the crucifix, and dispatched the souls, for a total of 3 extra VPs. These victory points are used to unlock further move combos for your weapon combinations. Also, by unlocking moves, you'll find new finishing moves that are performed automatically when attacking weakened enemies. These moves are kind of cool looking, but just like the rest of the game, there's a bit of jankiness, such as poor hit detection. In addition to the victory points, you also earn an upgrade point for one of 5 categories: Armor, Constitution, Curse, Weapon Efficiency, and Strength. Strength is supposed to increase your attack strength, Constitution buffs your max health, and Curse gives you more time to be in the cursed state. Armor is one of the best options, as it gives you a new piece of armor, therefore increasing the length of time before your health ticks down due to being struck by enemy pointy thingies. Weapon Efficiency? I got no idea. I put a few points into it hoping that it would increase your attack speed or maybe even increase the durability of your weapons, but I never noticed a difference. The game explains it's supposed to help your weapon combos, but I don't see how. So if you decide to put your upgrade points into this, well, beware. Another thing I must note is that there are some camera issues. I know, camera issues in a PS3 game? Well, there is a late game boss where you are attempting to defeat a massive demon without being cursed. You have to lure it into a specific area and then drop a chandelier on it. The catch is that once the creature gets to this point, the camera shifts, making it unnecessarily difficult to navigate to the switch you need to get to before the demon moves away from its impending death. There are a few other times, like, say, performing the kill moves, where scenery will get in the way and that's all you see. It doesn't happen often, but I felt it needed to be mentioned. There are some other questions I have for this game, and be forewarned, there are some minor spoilers ahead. You good? Okay. For one, you are told about the Templar's curse repeatedly, but here's my question. Why are only some Templars cursed? It's typically the bosses and your heroes that have the cursed status, and some of the bosses in the game aren't even Templars, but warriors from opposing armies. So how are they cursed? The game never explains where the curse comes from, other than possibly being hereditary from families that did some wicked evil stuff. I would have loved to know where it originated though. Secondly, Denz is hunting for the same relics that the guy running the Crusade is. I already mentioned that for some reason the bad guy wants them because they will allow him to do truly bad stuff, but Denz wants them because he states they will break the curse. But again, it's never explained how or how even he thinks this. Also, in the late areas of the game, you're in a church where you can bring up the curse, but every other church in the game, you can't because it's a holy area. Again, it's never explained why this is. Is it because of the ritual that was mysteriously began with some guy spiked on a wagon wheel? And why did the bad guy do this, but he's nowhere to be found? There's not even a boss fight here, so it makes no sense and almost feels like the developers were rushing just to put stuff here to call the game finished. Finally, why in the world would the relics of Christ bring about demons from hell? I am truly baffled by this. I missed part of this in Sunday school or something. The game never explains it. I know. It seems to be a common trend. And that's the Cursed Crusade. It's not a terrible game, but it does get kind of repetitious and boring after a few stages. It has a few cool ideas, like the slow, methodical combat, but it doesn't necessarily make for a fun gameplay experience. The cursed feel would have been better if the world looked maybe a bit sharper. As it stands, it just looks blurry. I feel if the story was more engaging or presented better, I would have enjoyed it more, but as it stands, it's just kind of blah. The game runs for about $15, so if it looks like your cup of tea, it's affordable. Final score? 4 out of 7. This is Reaper. Happy fragging.